So thank you for being here. It's my great, in fact, my great pleasure to be here to share with you some of my research work that I've been doing, and on top of that, some of the some of the fun projects I've been working on, like in my spare time, but they will become very relevant later on throughout the talk. So it's great to talk about that here. Anyway, so I always begin with something, to introduce myself a little bit and also do some sort of promotion. So bear with me. But so who am I? Again, my name is Cheung, and I recently defended my thesis, so you can start practicing comprehensible. I like being called more. So my research interest is in general human-computer interaction. During my PhD work, I looked in particular into large interactive displays, and I also am very interested in looking into user interface designs in general. So from large displays to handheld devices to in-game controllers, things like that. So I'm very interested in the design. So where am I from? So I was born and raised in Hong Kong. It's a little corner in the Southeast Asia area, and I have a background in computer science. So I did my undergrad and my master's in Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. In case you want to spend some time in a vibrant city in Southeast Asia, this is the place to go in Hong Kong, and feel free to talk to me if you want to do that. Later on, I moved on to do my PhD in the University of Waterloo. So I fly over the continent, 14 hours of direct flight, but I enjoy my stay in Waterloo, except for the month. Right, so the people I am fortunate to be working with a group of talented and nice people in Waterloo. So the two main groups that I've been working with is the Waterloo HCI group. We recently have this collaboration between different schools. The truth is, it happens that in the University of Waterloo, many schools are actually looking into HCI in general, including computer science, engineering, and also applied health sciences. So we decided to form this alliance of schools to call ourselves the Waterloo HCI group. We have members from all levels. We have people from undergrad, students from undergrad school, students with masters, PhDs, postdocs, and of course faculties. Right now, I'm working in a place called the Games Institute. So, as the name suggests, we mostly work on games. It's a wider net of faculties, including English and psychology. So, it's really nice to work with those people because I'm from a computer science and engineering background. Those things that they do is very fascinating. And we can talk more about that later on. But we actually play games all the time, and we also create games all the time. Board games, video games, card games, mobile games, any kind of games we will try to look into and create. So enough selling. So here is today's topic. There will be two main parts in my talk for today. The first part, once again, is mostly my research work in my PhD degree, passersby display interaction. In particular, I want to talk about two little things. One is how do I model the interaction part with the displays, and the second part is how did I use a methodology that I developed to evaluate interface designs, particularly for the earlier interaction stages. The second part of this talk will be about some of the projects that I'm working on. They are fun projects that is very related to what I do with my research as well. All right, so let's begin with the first part, passersby interaction. I would like to begin this section with a little quiz. So this is a photo taken by some researchers back in 2008. And take a look at this photo and think about what you can see in this photo. Anyone?
Tree.
People? Yeah, what's that?
A tree.
A tree, nice, good catch.
People are walking by?
Yes. So actually there's one thing here. The one thing is there's a large interactive display hidden somewhere here. So let me give you the answer. It's right there. And then who will know it is actually interactive? Like who will know it's actually a touch screen? It's very hard to know and very hard to notice. And this is actually the motivation, one of the biggest motivations in my research studies. So In recent years, large interactive displays has been around and widely adopted in a lot of public places, including museums, airports, on campus, or even in the streets, just like the one that you saw in the previous slide. However, it is often reported that these displays are underutilized, mostly because it's very difficult for them to capture the attention from passersby. It's also very hard for them to provide an engaging experience for them to interact. So, and there's a reason behind. Like one of the biggest reasons behind is the interaction between a passerby and this kind of technology is very unique in its own nature. When you compare to a better-known, personal computing paradigm, it's very different in the sense that one, it has its own very distinct usage patterns. If you're sitting in front of a computer, you can spend more time on it because you're sitting in front of it. However, for this kind of display, you're most likely you're walking around. You're heading towards your own direction, your own destination. So the interaction tends to be very quick, and from what we have seen so far, mostly they will be limited to a few seconds or up to say 5 minutes tops. So the turnaround time is super quick. There's also a very low commitment to actually interact with the display because it's not only your own device, it's just sitting there in a public space. It's not your main focus. So people tend to, if they have no idea what it is, they will just move on. There's also a variety of social configurations happening in front of these displays. You might have individuals interacting with the display. You might have a group of families or even a group of strangers interacting in front of the display simultaneously. So it's very different from personal PC paradigm. And when people look at this kind of a big screen or a new novel technology, as we all know, there are different kinds of expectations going on. Some will use their previous experience with similar technology to interact. Say, maybe they see it as a giant iPad, or they can relate it to the Kinect gesture recognition system in their home entertainment system. Some might use, when they see the size or the scale of that kind of displays, they will relate that to other kinds of metaphors, like a giant poster or like a window seeing as a portal to other spaces as well. So because of all these variations in large interactive displays, there's been a lot of work to investigate how interaction is actually being processed. So with that comes to the first little part of this section of my talk. So during my thesis work, I looked particularly into the earlier stage of interaction because there's been a lot of work focusing on the later stage, like how do you scaffold users to learn how to use the display as a novel technology. I, however, want to look at the earlier part of the interaction, like how do you draw someone's attention, how do you intrigue the person. What happens if the interface or the display is not capable of doing just that? So this is the first part, the part that I really focus on in my work. Right. So the typical way to study the usage of this kind of displays is the so-called in the wild study or experimental methodologies. It follows the ethnographic approach where you will have a display being deployed in a designated area, and then you have the researcher going in as a silent observer. He or she doesn't do anything, doesn't interfere at all. They just sit there and watch how the display is being used. Most of the time, they will take few notes or video record the whole process, and later on, with those data, they will use a thematic approach to look for recurring patterns or themes to formulate okay, so this is normally how a person will see a display, how a person will get confused, things like that. The good thing about this kind of study methodology is that it is very realistic because it's actually being placed at a place, in a public place. The users also are very realistic because they are actual users of the display. And then typically there's no worrying about finding enough participants because you don't actually have to recruit anyone. However, the downside of this kind of study methodology is that it is often very difficult to control the environment. Once the display is out there, it's out there. You can't really intervene anything. And then it's also very hard to stop a random person and ask them questions. How do you think about the display without disrupting the traffic, the foot traffic? At the same time, it is also, in terms of deployment, the preparation cost is often high because you want the display to be robust enough so that the system won't crash all the time. Because once it's out there, you can't always try to fix some bugs. And at the same time, physically, it has also to be robust so that it can withstand a good amount of usage. Some people might try to poke your screen a little bit too hard than what you want actually for. So with that in mind, me and my supervisor, Dr. Stacy Scott, we came up with a lab-based study methodology to study just this part. So the details is published in UBCOM in 2015 Japan. But the idea is it's a very low-cost way to study how people go through the earlier stage of interaction in a laboratory environment. Because we want to study this particular area at this stage of interaction, there are several requirements has to be met. The first one is it has to start participants from the very beginning of the stage. It has to hide the true purpose of the study, because once we tell our participants that, you know what, we are trying to see if our display is drawing your attention, then all the results will not be valid anymore because their attention, or they already know about the display. And because we want to conduct the study in a laboratory environment, we still want it to set up in a way so that it emulates the environment of a public display with distractions and with a walking component involved. The key to this methodology is that we employ a special kind of experimental deception. So does anyone know what experimental deception is? Yeah? Basically, to put it in a bad way, you lie. But you lie in a good way. So, and it's not a new methodology. It's frequently used in psychology area because they want to retrieve unbiased data. For example, they want to have the attention and the perception from their unknowing participants. One of the more famous study illustrating this methodology is the invisible gorilla test. If you look up invisible gorilla in YouTube, you know what I'm talking about. It's a study done in 1999. It's demonstrating something called attention blindness. This experimental deception is also used in the HCI community and also in the particular in interactive displays or services area as well. But most of them use it in a way we call them a waiting room treatment. So the researcher will post an ad of a study which is completely related to the real study, and then they ask the participant to sit in a waiting room because something is being set up on the other room for the study. But in that waiting room, actually there were displays trying to draw their attention and stuff like that. So this is usually the way in the HCI community deception is being done to study that particular area of approach to the interactive display. However, we saw that one problem with that is the task itself can be very unrelated to the real task. You invite a participant using a completely unrelated task. It seems a little bit waste of time, right? So we modified that particular part a little bit. We actually modified that deception task to be more relevant to the public space interaction in particular. So the task was very carefully designed so that it helps to sell this like public space interaction. And then, of course, we want to set up the experimental room in a way so that it's distractive enough. In the interest of time, we'll just quickly go through the process. The process is we prepare, the task, the questionnaire, set up the equipment, and then the participants will be invited. They go through different phases of the study. Later on, we also talk about how the data is being analyzed. So with that, we were able to increase the experimental control because we can decide what to show the participants. We also can shorten the development time because it's happening in the lab. It doesn't have to be extremely robust. And I think a lot of you can relate to this. It actually speeds up the ethics application time because there's no real risk or hazard like in a public space. So it really helps us a lot. So with this study methodology, we actually apply that to one of our studies. So in particular, we look into how do we combine proxemic space interaction with visuals shown in the display in terms of drawing people's attention. So first off, the proxemics theory was first introduced back in 1966 by Thomas Hall. It's about how people will interact or behave when another person is standing at different distances. When a person is standing a little bit closer, then this person will interact slightly different or behave very differently. The HCI community later on adapted this idea and replaced one side with a computer interface. So depending on how close the person is, the display will actually show slightly different things, say more details of something, just to provide this sense of closeness. So we want to investigate whether this kind of adaptiveness will draw people's attention. So we ran a lab study, and we had participants to try to navigate within the experimental room. We did not tell them anything about the display. We just told them that, well, this is the experimental room, but here's the task. Go for it. So, but what they didn't know was we are trying to show different things on display to see if their attention was being drawn. So this is one of the conditions we have. So let's see if I can play it. So there's a silhouette or shadow being shown on display. This person is being tracked and with a Kinect on the other side, and then the shadow or the silhouette is being shown on screen. At the same time, the movement actually changes depending on how close that person was. So with the methodology, we were able to actually ask very in-depth questions, and then with video recording like this one, we were able to show that showing this shadow and slowing down the speed of the content was effective in drawing people's attention. We also saw some playfulness with when the shadow is being shown, because when a person sees the shadow, even though we never told them about the shadow, we saw them start to, like play with the shadow, doing fun stuff. So it's very interesting to see just like that. So more results and more details were published and presented in ITS in 2015. So if you're interested in that, like how the methodology is being applied, this will be the thing that you might want to check out. So that's the first part of my talk. It's about my research work. Exciting, but we all have to have some hobbies, right? So this is my hobby. My hobby is also related to technology, so happen. So the first thing I want to talk about is augmented reality. Who does not recognize the screen on the rightmost side? Who does not? Like everyone know what that is, right? It's Pokemon Go. They claim that there's a little button at the top right corner. It's called AR. So it stands for augmented reality. We actually had a long debate about whether it's actually augmented reality or not. And then of course, as academics, we try to pull out citations, and then we always end up finding this one because it's actually one of the citations or one of the definitions being cited very often. It's being cited it's being published in 1997 by Zoomer. And this is how this person he described AR. It's basically where 3D virtual objects are integrated into a 3D real environment in real time. So the operative work is in real time. Of course, some are like 3D stuff happening, but the operative work is in real time. So when you interact, something will happen at the same time. So that's the main idea. So I am not the expert in AR, but because I'm interested in using it, so I'm just quickly use one slide to talk about what is this if you are also interested in how it works. So basically, you need a camera. The camera will detect a triggering image or object in the real world, and then it will try to calculate the distance between that object, tracked object, and the camera, as well as the angle. Later on, it will, because based on this information, it will transform the associated 3D virtual object into the right scale and orientation. Then it will overlay this rendering onto the live image of what it sees. So, and this process will repeat very quickly so that the tracking will happen. So that's basically what AR does. So with that in mind, hopefully it works. I want to show you 2 demo videos that I did in my spare time. So the first one was very quick. It's not playing. Let me see if I can. This. One second. So basically what works is I have a business card, and then there's a fountain blowing up once it detects the business card. So it's pretty neat, and I'm going to pause it if I can. Right, so this is a small project that I did. So let me just go back. And this is actually pretty fun because once again it detects the card. Second, it tracks the card so that when I move my phone, actually it will move along with that. It's very nice. The next one, I'm going to skip it, but later on I might actually want to talk about that. But this is actually a still image of the next video. So so the idea is you are basically superimposing some 3D objects onto a 2D or real-world object. So the one thing that I really like this technology is that it supplements the existing world object with interactive media. So you can do things like you move your own device as a portal to do fun stuff, interactive stuff. And then right now what I'm showing you is just a visual interaction. So you can actually extend it to sound. You can augment the sound. You can even augment if you have some crazy setup in your device. And it also affords new forms of interaction because now you are holding a very interesting input device right now. Imagine you are not just holding a phone, you're holding something else, having a display, and then there's so much stuff you can do with that technology. Super. Right. The next technology that I want to talk about is the web-based service. So I'm not talking about the cloud services or cloud storage. I'm talking about how you can connect your own device with a server. This is nothing new. This client-server infrastructure has been around for ages. But what's neat about this is there's recently a thing called WebSocket. So WebSocket basically is a two-way communication between a phone or a mobile device browser with a server. So the interesting word is browser. I didn't use the word client because there's a reason for that. Everything that you program or create on a mobile phone, let's say a mobile phone, is not within the browser. So it has a relatively low development cost because you don't have to develop any additional app. You just need to write JavaScript, a few lines of code, and then you can do amazing stuff. And believe it or not, your browser is very powerful. Your browser actually have access to orientation, touch, acceleration data on your phone. So you might not even know about it, but when you move your device, the browser actually is able to know what that is. And then using WebSocket, it's possible to send this data to a server, and the server depending on the orientation of the phone or the device, it does something in response. So this is a small project that I did when I am bored. Nice. So the idea is I connect an error. Come on. Maybe I'll try again later on. But I'll just describe what it is. It's basically you have your phone. Your phone is running on a browser, and then on a computer you have an application. And then when you move your phone, it will actually show things like depending on how your phone orients. It's a very simple proof of concept idea, but it's so much fun because there's nothing I need to install on my own device. And we use it all the time as a demo because it's just so easy to set up. And of course, like once I have this thing, I decided that, you know what, I might just want to bring it back to my research. It's always like that. I learn something new and then I think, yeah, can I apply that on my research? And the answer is yes. Everything is connected. So the idea was like, this is the part that I just showed you. Like you have your mobile device connected through the web socket to a server. But the server now connects to a large display. What it does is the large display will respond to your own device, and then it provides a new way of interactivity. We call it cross-device interaction. I did not come up with the term, but it's a general term where you can use multiple devices and that communicate with each other. Now, this will work. We ended up, I worked with some of my colleagues, and then we applied this trying to, so we know that there are a lot of barriers for people to actually interact with a large display. For example, people are a little bit, they're shy, they don't want to embarrass themselves by making mistakes. And then, but if they can use their own device to try things out, it might actually be more straightforward or easier for them to actually start using the large display. So what we did was a project with this.
Large displays are often installed in public locations. However, people do not often use these displays as they may be uncertain of how to interact, and they may be discouraged because they fear they will look foolish. However, using a phone or a tablet is a socially acceptable behavior with well-defined interaction paradigms. In this paper, we explore a design space where personal devices, such as phones, are used as an alternative entry point to initiate and lead to other steps of interaction with an interactive display. We discussed the various barriers to interaction of user workplace.
So the general idea, as you saw, the proof of concept was a game. So the game was just a reverse breakout. But it's cool because once it supports a lot of devices, like BlackBerry works, I think, or Android works, iPhone of course works. And then the way we make it work was we connect a server to a large display. On the display, what wasn't shown on the screen was there are 4 like QR codes at the corners. All you need to do is to scan the QR code or punch in the URL, and then that's all you need to do. The display will connect to you, your browser will connect to the display, it will tell you which battle you're controlling, and then you are playing a collaborative game with your friends to bounce one ball to break all the bricks. So it's very nice. It's a very nice proof of concept thing. But the idea behind is we want to streamline the whole process of interacting with the large display. Game is just one example or application of that. We want to use your own mobile device to loosen up these barriers, basically. Like there are different barriers stopping a person to actually interact with the display, and then we want to use this connection to break these barriers. How do we actually do that was presented in a poster in ITS 2014. I would be very happy to talk to you about that later on because it involves a lot of barriers. But anyway, so the bottom line is I really enjoy using, as you can see, both AR and this is, I'm trying to move a little bit away from just one single large display, but multiple devices happening at the same time. And the nice thing about having your own device in the equation is that it's a very familiar thing that you have. You carry with you all the time. You might even want to even customize it. Put your own case, put your own sticker on it. So this is a device that you own. You like it, you carry it with you. And the cool thing about that is with a large display, you cannot take that home, right? What if you are at a museum, you saw something very nice, and then you interact with it, and then you use the device. You can actually take the device home with the content that you saw or you like, you captured, and then it's a nice souvenir for you to take home, right? And fun fact is that I just checked it out. The Apollo guidance computer, which sends the thing to space, is way less powerful than a phone these days. Like it's more than 1,000 times less fast, and this amount of times less memory. But that device sends you to space, send a thing to space. So imagine what a phone can do these days. And this is iPhone 5. It's like what, 3 years ago, like crazy. So I want to end this with just this. The power is in your hands. This is really good. Like your hands are very capable device. Like you can shuffle things. I like magic tricks. So I know this like triple shuffle. So I play guitar. So I know that. I don't even know how to call that. But I don't need. So I'm showing you that what you can do. But there's a lot of possibilities happening. Depending, like our hands are very versatile. We can hold things, we can grab things. I think I saw a video like this. It's a music video using the words you can do with your hands, grabs, punch, something like that. But things you can do with your hands is limitless, and it depends on the device that your hands is holding. And I believe I'm very happy. I'm glad you know about all your work because I think it's going to be amazing. So with that, I finish. I conclude my slides, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I have a question. So it goes from like one of that first black and white slide you showed us. I had a couple questions. One was that slide biased for the audience because it's in black and white? Because what I want to know is if it was in color, would the idea of the interactive display have stood out more to us?
Maybe. So I saw this photo to make a point, right?
Okay.
So
yeah.
it's somewhat biased. I think in the paper is colored, but at the same time, these are all colored, right? Your display is actually competing with like neon lights when it is at night, right? It is competing with all this. I think it's a clothing store, I believe. With all this, like storefront has been around for ages. They have different ways to draw to attract people, to invite them into their store and pay money, spend money on their stuff. So even though like there's no color in it, there are different kinds of things that will distract a person. I think this is actually the point I want to communicate. But good point. Like yes, I try to make a point mostly because, and then I think making it black and white might sell the point a little better.
Okay. And then my follow-up question to that was because when you showed us that you use the term underutilized, fair enough, and for the point of the one still image, taken in 1 second over a day or. But my point is like, what is the definition of underutilized, and how does that transcribe itself across different circumstances?
Right. So this is a very good question. In fact, it was a similar person of that was asking my defense. So we kind of talk about this conversion rate. So conversion rate basically means that you have a display. You have people noticing. There's a huge number of people noticing the display. It's not something that is invisible. But what's important is the next part. How do you actually draw people's attention and then have them interact? Because by nature it's interactive. So we want them to actually, so when I say underutilized, there are different parts of it. One is they try to make it attractive, but it's not very attractive. But the more important part is how do they communicate that it is interactive and what's the right way to interact? Because yes, it's a touch screen, so like people just pop things around. Most of the time they just use one finger, but like sometimes we have this multi-touch thing. You can do crazy stuff with multi-touch, but only a small group of people actually wanted to try that because they are not sure what they can do. So underutilized basically means that most of the time it means that they're not being used in their full potential. They're designed by the designers, engineers. You can do a lot of fun stuff, but nobody actually knew or wanted to use that in that way. So that's one. Okay.
As just as a follow-up to this, so underutilized, do you consider this to be features that were designed or number of people that use it in any specific way?
So both. So conversion rate is one of the easier measurement, because if you see that like there's a lower conversion rate, then it means that most people will try to at least interact. But using it in the designed way is another measurement. So there are two different, but they are both important ways of measuring success of a display.
So which one is more important?
Hard to say. I would say the first one to me right now, because this is actually the beginning, right? Because you want to design display so that people will notice and at least start to interact. That I think my focus, the reason why I'm saying this is because my focus is drawing people's attention. It depends on the context, because if you want this display to be extremely useful, it gives you the precise information of when's your flight coming up, then knowing how to use that will become more important. But if it's like a casual thing, you just walk around, draws your attention, wants you to spend some time, kill some time, play with it, then knowing exactly what to do might not be as important as just converting them into stay and just playing around.
So a question about your lab-based experiment versus in the wild, right? In your lab-based experiment, you're kind of setting up people with nothing else to do, which means you're drawing their attention a little more easily because they're idle. Whereas in this example here, you have people who are walking, they're going someplace, and it's much harder to grab their attention because they're already on a task for something else. So how do you rationalize the context of use in the lab versus in the wild in that sense?
Right, good question. And I first of all apologize. I think I didn't make that clear. So the task itself, actually there are two parts in the task. One is, as you said, they are just wandering around. So they have ample time to notice the display. That's the ideal situation. There's a second part of the task that I didn't mention was I actually gave them a mobile phone to conduct a task. Like there's something to do on your mobile phone, check a schedule, look up for stuff while you're walking. So it's kind of like the opposite of the spectrum. Like your attention is like drawn so into your own device. Like I think if I'm running this thing today, I will ask them to play Pokemon Go. It's like drawing their attention so much into the device. It's kind of like the two spectrum. So we designed it in this way, so we kind of see what happens. And then we have some sort of like other things happening around in the room so that it distracts them a little bit. So that helps to sell that. Did I say it?
No, thank you.
You're just stretching. Okay. On.
Please. I was just wondering, it seems that you've kind of looked at the aspect of a phone being something that people are more familiar with and kind of personal.
Yep.
But I was wondering if you didn't really touch much on the fact that, at least in your examples, it seemed like you're using it as kind of like a physical tracking device versus a touchscreen interface.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, like, do you think if you just gave someone a block that's not their phone, you'd have the same result just because you're using kind of a more tactile, like, three-dimensional interface rather than something flat that you touch?
Good question. I did not try that, so I cannot give you a definite answer. But I think you are touching on something very interesting, because I think there's a difference between giving them a block that you make, or you ask them to use their own device. The reason why I'm saying this is, I wonder if it is common here, but I've seen crazy cases. When I say crazy cases, you will never recognize it's a cell phone anymore. It's a case that looks like a cat. It's a case that looks like a spoon. Yeah, those ones. Like, I myself will never use it, but I know someone who does. And then, like, you can't just print every single shape that you want. So I think this is a very interesting point. We can totally just work on that. Right? But yeah, being able to do this is a little bit more than just touching screen.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an extension of Anthony's question. When you're starting to look at capturing the attention of people as they're walking by and recognizing that they might be engaged in their own tasks, how do you come up with, say, polite ways of trying to capture attention, or is that a concern at this point?
Yes. So we talk about something. There's a very interesting term I didn't touch on, but it's being around in the area. It's called interoperability. So first of all, you need to know whether a person is interruptible or not. It's very hard because you never know. So I did not touch on that. That's fair. It's more like I don't. So one of the things I didn't do was in the display or even on the phone is I don't want it to be super blinky. Like someone actually asked me about this question, like why don't you just make it like a casino, machine, your slot machine, like keep blinking, blasting sound, blah blah blah. I don't want that. I want it to be a little bit more subtle, so that if you decide to tune yourself out of it, you can. So it might not be the most effective way because if your idea is just as a design, the idea is just to draw their attention. I don't care what you're doing right now. If you are having a phone call, I will cut you off and then I will interpolate, look left. So I don't want to do that. In theory, you can, but I don't. This is not the goal of public display, like at least to my understanding. And detecting whether a person is interruptible is very tough call. Some work has been done in terms of tracking. If someone is looking around, nothing in their hand, it's more likely that person can be interrupted, and then you might just use a display, or you might say that some of the technologies I didn't touch on, so iBeacons, things like proximity sensing thing going on. So it can send a notification to your phone. If you decide not to care, then you just decide to go walk away, then that's fine. So that might be one answer to that. I did not touch on that. Yes.
So following up on that, what is the goal of the public display? I know you set out some metaphors such as a poster, a window,
Right.
and a whole series of non-interactive metaphors. Right? Are there other metaphors that are more interactive that the public display should be?
I guess yes. So one of the things that I just came up to my mind was interactive display or exhibits in museums. So when people go to a museum, they expect to play with things. It turns out there's a huge literature in how do you design a museum so that people will have a great experience and have a great learning experience. And then one of the findings they had very early on was to make the exhibit as interactive as possible, because people can get their hands on, even as simple as a button or like a lever will have amazing results in terms of, yeah, I remember pressing this button and things go boom, like things like that happening. So in terms of interactivity and that, I think this is a more than a public display. Public display mostly because of the hardware constraints. We are sort of limited to touch screens or maybe some motion gesturing, but in a museum exhibits you can do a lot more than that. So yeah, it's not like the most interactive thing you have, a public display. There are other kinds, but there are different expectations going on. As a display, I mostly look into vertical display. So there's a limit on how people use their metaphor. You can't look at this and say this is a table. This is not a table, but it can be a poster, right?
In that context, where does the large component start? Like if you have an iPad on the wall, it's not the same as having this or the giant one that you had in one of your videos. So where does the sort of large component start or ends, and do people react the same way?
Thank you for asking this question. This is a very interesting question because very early on we wrote something, and this is actually one of the reviews we got. In the very beginning, I actually gave them a dimension. Anything bigger than I think it's 32 inches diagonal is called large. And then I got challenged. It's like, why do you think it's large? What about 42? How about 72? How about 100? So in the end, we decided that we shouldn't be using a dimension to say what is being meant by large. When I say large now, I would describe it as a thing that is visible from a certain distance, like not close distance, maybe across the room. It can also support simultaneous interaction at the same time. So this is what I say large. If it is an iPad, then you can, at most, you can support maybe two-person kind of sitting almost like shoulder to shoulder, then I won't consider it as a large display. But something that is like we are comfortable standing next to each other, both interacting display without interfering others' work, that I would say is a large display.
So you need to have people being able to interact independently.
Yes, this is one of the way characteristic of large display in my mind.
Isn't that governed by distance from the screen and such as well?
It depends on what kind of interaction you want to have. If it's a touch screen, it's always at arm's length. But if it is a little more distance, then so back to your question again, like it depends on size again. If it is like more like a gestural base, then you can afford a slightly smaller size, but still considered as a large display. So that's why I kind of dropped the dimension part, because it's more about what are the interaction that's being supported by display.
But in the case you just named, then you might have a smaller screen, but you have to have a larger interaction space.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, you have to have room between people to gesture,
Right.
as opposed to, so
Yeah.
this might be smaller, but then you need more space, so.
I get the sense that you're trying to say there's a constant, like space-time.
No, I don't have a
That would be
specific
fine.
answer, I'm looking, but this is kind of, there's multiple things to think
Yeah,
about.
I like that. It's interactive space, because I think I started off just touchscreen, and then later on I realized that there's so much more interactive screens. Like you can use the floor, you can use the lights, you can use the sound, that extends to a 3D space than just a 2D plane of interactivity, which is pretty exciting. Given that like there's just so much possibility going on here on top of just a touchscreen. And then I think people are a little bit hesitant to use touchscreen at some point. Like there was one time I saw people who asked me, how often do you wipe your screen if it is in a public space? Well, I said, well, it depends. If it becomes dirty, then I will. But like I normally don't do that.
I was just wondering, what separates an interactive display from just like what makes it a display as opposed to like an arcade game or like a TV that has a controller plugged in?
Right. So, good question, and the answer to that is it depends on where you put the interaction is. So when I say that is, so there's this input side and there's this output side. When I say an interactive display, normally I would say that it's like in close range, and then it responds to your action directly. So back to your example, a remote control of a TV. You in theory you can control some of it, but I think an interactive display is more responsive than just changing a channel or changing the volume than that. So there's more kind of like interactivity going on than just switching things or pressing buttons.
Do you think it has to be like some sort of visually appealing, kind of like a piece of art almost? Or can it just be an interface?
It can be. It depends on how you want to use it. If it is an art thing, like art has this, or a visual thing has this, we as a human being are more drawn towards the visual stuff. Like this takes us like more than 80% of our communication channel. So using the visual channel as a way to draw people's attention will be the easy answer to that. But there are other kinds of things other than visual. I'm no expert in that, but I think there's some possibilities going on.
Any other questions?
I was wondering, I'm assuming you did some sort of statistical analysis. Could you describe to me a little bit, just the statistical analysis and, because I'm guessing you did an assessment on what the most influential covariates ended up being through different, maybe mixed model analysis and what some of those were?
Right, so for the lab study, when we collect the data, we ran ANOVA mostly, because it's it's a between subject test, and then there were 3 conditions in total. So we ended up using ANOVA mostly. We also, like this is the statistical part, but at the same time, the data we collect allowed us to do some sort of like affinity diagramming. It's more like a qualitative one. So we kind of did both. But to answer to your statistic question, we use ANOVA, we use linear contrast. Those were the 2 things we used.